a momentous occasion occurred. OpenAI introduced ChatGPT. The genie was out of the bottle, and everything has changed. Now, they caught Google, Meta, Amazon, all on the back foot, and they're now desperate to try and catch up with what ChatGPT can provide. And I'll give some examples of what we can do with it a little bit later on. Just to continue with the introduction into AI, sorry, we seem to have moved back for some reason. There are different types of AI. So the first is this element, which is ubiquitous in our daily lives. It is essentially a small part of the computer science domain. And it's something that uses a form of technology to deal with a specific problem that we as humans face. So as an example, I'll bring again the phone. We want to get from A to B. So we have a navigation system on there to take us from A to B. And it's the artificial intelligence embedded within that that allows us to do it. We want to get into our phone. The facial recognition allows us to do that, which is all based on AI. And then there is a whole load of other things, maybe something to examine X-rays or other medical items. These are all part of our daily lives. The generative AI element is something that allows us to ask a question, or in AI terms, create a prompt using text or voice, or a combination of text, voice, and image, or text, voice, and video to generate an output, hence the word generative AI. And that's the thing that really has captured the imagination of a lot of individuals. Finally, the thing that worries a lot of people, and Elon Musk in particular, thinks that this is going to ruin humanity, and this is the general AI. General AI is something that doesn't focus on a specific problem, but it almost adopts human behavior, human characteristics, and it can think on its feet. Some of you may have seen Stanley Kubrick's 2001, HAL, the computer. That's the sort of concept behind the general AI. Now, there's a lot of debate about when is this going to come to fruition? Is it going to be in a couple of years? Is it going to be in 10 years? I don't know. I specifically don't know. What I would say is that it's not going to be something that will switch on and off. It will be transitioning through. As the generative AI gets better and better, we move closer into this general AI concept. And that's something that we as individuals need to bear in mind. Now, Goldman Sachs did a study, and they have predicted that 3 million technology workers, and that's the like of you, me, doctors, architects, all our jobs are going to be displaced because of generative AI. And when I say displaced, it's not specifically being made redundant, it's going to change, because we are going to have to use these sort of platforms or lose out. And that's why I think it was so important to incorporate this into this study for the Economic Social Research Council. Let's go back and focus a little bit more on generative AI. It's made up of 3 pillars. You've got the AI bit, which I've talked about. Then there's machine learning. So the machine learning is really where I grew up on. So I'd say I'd really position myself as a data scientist working in the marketing domain. And I've done a lot of work around the machine learning, particularly around topic modeling. That's the skill area that I like to see myself. But there, what you're doing is you're capturing large amounts of data, and you are helping the machine, the technology, the program that you're focusing on to understand, to see what you're trying to portray and replicate that later on. So here's a picture of a cat. Here's another picture of a cat. Here's another picture of a cat. And then later on, the machine knows that's a picture of a cat, etc., etc., etc. Now, the thing which really has taken everything by storm is this deep learning, the neural networks. Jeff Hinton, who is one of the father and founders of generative AI, was one of the key advocates of this concept. He and some of the others in it had to fight tooth and nail to say, yeah, neural networks is going to work, because there was a whole body of other scholars who said, no, it's not. It's a bit like us this day if we utilize the standard academic process, but something between qualitative and quantitative. But it was a bit more argumentative in that environment. But he's won. And he received the Alan Turing Award a few years ago, and he talked about the hardships and the problems he and the team got to get there. And that is one of the key drivers of this generative AI process. So I'm now going to try and just explain a little bit about what neural networks are. And to do that, I will use an example of images of numbers. So 0 to 9, so 10 numbers, 0 to 9. And they're replicated in a pixel image, 28 by 28. So what we see here is the number 9. You've got the 28 by 28 pixels, each which we call it our nodes. That gives you 784 potential outputs. So they are all given numbers. So these numbers represent how bright the item is. So the closer it is to 1, the brighter it is. So that says that is going to be the number in question. And that number represents the activation code for that. Now, what happens is we take that 784 inputs and create the first line of the neural network. So there we see it now being created. And then at the output, you've got 10 other nodes. So the 0 to 9. In between, you've got the hidden layers. Now, the realities, these neural networks, they're much, much larger, and they're not obviously in 2-dimensional as well. And what the hidden networks try and do is identify this little rounded bit up here. Is that going to be an 8 or a 9? If it was a 2, that little bit at the top, is that going to be a 2 or a Z? The 5 bit at the top, is that going to be a 5 or an S? So what's happening is that the neural is looking at the data, pushing it into the inputs, it's feeding through the neural network, and then it's coming up with the answer. So what does all of that mean? Contrary to popular belief, I'm speaking to individuals in the business sector, they think, oh, generative AI, what's happening there is something's gone out, very much like Google, seen what's on the internet, captured it, and it's remembered it. It's not the case. What it's doing is it's giving it a number, and the output is essentially statistics. So this is driven by probabilities. In this example here, we are, let's say, asking the generative AI to produce a nursery rhyme or finish off a nursery rhyme. Mary had a little, so it's working out that the highest probability word that's going to appear next is going to be lamb, and then the next one after that is whose. Mary had a little lamb whose fleece was white as snow. So it's using probability. Now, you're all aware of the phrase lies, lies, and statistics. What that means is every now and again, you end up with hallucinations. And when I say hallucinations, in the AI or generative AI field, what that means is that it's going to deliver you a wrong piece of information. So it's embarrassed about getting the answer wrong, but it just delivers it to you anyway. Now, some of you who have maybe gone on to ChatGPT and asked it a question, what were the scores of the game yesterday, or the cricket scores or whatever? And it'll say, well, actually, I've only looked at the data over until I think it was September 2022 or something like that. I can't give you the latest information, and so it doesn't pick that up. When you ask a little bit more complex questions, like produce a piece of work similar to Shakespeare's or whatever, sometimes if it hasn't had the training, it will give you the wrong piece of information. So the important takeaway there is that you just cannot rely specifically on what it delivers to you. You need to interpret the output and make sure that it is correct. One of the ways that I encourage my students and my clients to progress is to adopt what's known as exploratory generative AI. And what I mean by that is that when you write the prompt, you not only give it the context, you not only give it the objective or the question, you then ask for it to explain in detail how it is delivering the output. And that way you, as the human, can check the output to ensure that you are happy with what it is delivering. It also, particularly from my students' point of view, helps them understand some particular complex process. I mentioned earlier on that generative AI does not search the internet. Well, actually, if you've got the paid version of ChatGPT, you can ask it to search the internet now. It does have that facility. Or if you now use the Bing chat search, it will search the internet, asking you or giving you the answers based on the questions that you provide. So the way that we do searches in the future will definitely change. So exploratory AI, really key thing to employ if you are thinking about doing or asking a question on ChatGPT. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I did a quick scan and identified that there were 222 different LLMs. So when we talk about generative AI, they are built on these foundational models or large language models. 222 out there and more appearing. The circles represent the size of the parameters. So that is 530 billion, 280 billion. Now, these parameters are essentially the number of training, I suppose, data sets that they've implied. So trying to explain it in more layman terms, the more parameters it has, the better the training the generative AI platform has. So it's important really to, if you're going to do a general question and answer session with generative AI, use the bigger platforms out there. But these bigger platforms consume a lot of energy. They need GPU or TPU processors to be able to do the analysis that you want. Now, you can actually go down to smaller LLMs, particularly some of the open source, and focus on specific areas. Let's say maybe question and answers from your business. You can train it so that it understands exactly what is required from that point of view. Now, ChatGPT, when we looked at previously at the previous slide, oops, you can see there ChatGPT 4, it's undisclosed. The current thoughts are it's somewhere between 1 trillion and 1.7 trillion parameters. So you can see that the biggest one we saw earlier on was 540 billion, I think it was, if I remember correctly. That ChatGPT has quite a large number. Now, I read over the weekend that Amazon are just about to launch their LLM, and I think it said we're going to have something like 2 trillion parameters on their, I believe it's going to be called Olympus, but it may change going forward. So they have the power behind that to be able to really exploit this going forward. So when you're looking at your options, ChatGPT at the moment has the biggest output and can give you a lot of better answers than the other models. Now, this is something that I picked up while dealing with quite a few organizations. The problem with ChatGPT is that they think, or large language models, is that companies believe that the data that they provide will be utilized to train the models going forward. This could be problematic, particularly if it's health data or financial data, because it could spit out your details when someone asks a question. And we've seen that with the image creations, because allegedly Getty images were used to train some of the platforms, Runway ML, to produce their images. So when the images were produced, you could see the little watermark appear on the output. Now they're being sued because of it, but these are the sort of things that you would have to consider. Now, there are ways around it, and you've got the RAG opportunity, so the retrieval augmented generation opportunity, and the trusted execution environment. Now, the RAG is new to generative AI, but the TEE is something that's been in place for a while now. So when you're developing your generative AI platforms, you may want to think about it if you're using specific sensitive data, having a RAG platform to support it, or better still, incorporate that within a TTE. So what does that look like? This is the ideal method, but actually, as it stands, it's a little bit more simplistic than that, because if you have the paid version of ChatGPT, or if you use Claude AI, you can upload some data, and it sits in a temporary file. And then your data is manipulated, and it gives you the output. Now, ideally, particularly if the data set is very, very large, you will want it to go through a vector database, because it then makes the process much more efficient. Something like Pinecone or Databricks out there that can be utilized. Now, when you're doing something like this, there is a certain amount of coding required. So you would employ something like a LangChain framework through Python to be able to do this, to link with the output. Now, there are other platforms that you could potentially use. Two examples are Replit and VoiceFlow. So the Replit is almost like an easier version of the LangChain model to help you interrogate the data of your data set, but it could be a little bit expensive. But if you're a business and you don't want to do all the coding, that might be the way forward. So what you would do potentially is have a local environment. So you are actually building your initial data set behind a firewall, but it's still going out to the LLM. Potentially, the better solution will be to incorporate it all within there. But that means actually having to use an open source LLM so that you can download it yourself. But when I say download it, you're going to have to host it on your own platform, because you will need some form of GPU, TPU to do some of the processing within it. This is, I think, one of the areas within business and also academia that can really, really be exploited. I'm doing some work with my students as it stands at the moment. And as an example, what's happening is that as I give the lecture, it is recorded on Teams. Now, because it's being recorded on Teams, it can be transcribed. So I have the transcript data and the lecture slides, which are then joined together. Now, when we first started doing it, we could upload it onto things like Claude AI, because that's the free version. It will work on ChatGPT 4, but you are required to pay for it. And that is a little bit, well, that is problematic for me, because what it then does, it has the them and us situation. Those students who can afford it get the better option, and those who can't have to suffer. So I've taken that off, and I'm actually trying to go back to thinking about adopting a solution like this. Now, last week, before Sam Altman was sacked, he had his developer day, and he introduced the concept of GPTs, which means that you can create a framework within OpenAI to set up specific questions like this. So you could actually utilize that. But again, I would be a little bit uncomfortable because it's in their environment, not in my environment. You could use their APIs, and that's their application programming interface, to bring the data back and use something like this to actually manage your data internally. And that's something else I'm going to be looking at. Again, you could utilize something like the Replit and voice flow to be able to interrogate that data, or even the LangChain framework from Python. So just to finish off this introduction at the top level of generative AI, the thing that we need to really bear in mind is what Paul Raitzer from the Marketing Institute of Artificial Intelligence put forward as the law of uneven AI distribution. And that's built on three elements, very much like your theory of planned behavior or the UT-AUT model that some of you may be familiar with, which essentially says that you need understanding, you need access, and you need what's the acceptance. So understanding, access, and acceptance. A little example on this project, which I've embarked on now, even though I went through the process of the due diligence of getting ethics and governance approved, I had a real battle with our own IT and governance team to get to procure the platforms, because they weren't quite sure what it's like. And I'm finding this a lot in industry with the big players. I've just come back from giving a talk at a European retail symposium, and anecdotally talking to micro businesses, what they're saying is that no, I can't do this because I'm just too busy doing what I need to do to survive. The small and medium-sized businesses are saying, yeah, I really want to get into this, but I need the understanding. The big businesses are saying, I'd like to get into it, but my IT/legal department is saying no. So you can see that this is really relevant. So the message there is that if you're going to embark on this type of research, your biggest problem, as in any change management process, is dealing with people and processes within an organization. So you're going to have to include that within your research design. So that's an overview of generative AI. Let's look at some of the outputs I did within the project that I've embarked upon. So I mentioned earlier on 220 odd LLMs. I didn't have time to look at them all, so I picked out some of the big players. So the OpenAI, Google Bard, Anthropic's Claude. So these are the closed. These are essentially video stroke image generation, and these are open source stroke items where you can do more development work within it. So what I very quickly found with the businesses that were working on, actually, they didn't want to do more in-depth research. They just wanted to stick with simple output. So we found that actually the best results were coming from ChatGPT, the paid version 4. 20 quid, I think it's 20 quid or 25 quid a month for a business. It's not a lot, particularly if you're going to actually do some testing. Now, to supplement the output of this research, I was using some other aspects. So Mentionalytics is a social listening platform. And what that allowed me to do was capture market data, customer insights to analyze for the organization. These items here were really around the website. So Neil Patel focused on the web audit, stroke keywords analysis. Same with Google Keyword Planner, and the Screaming Frog platform allowed me to analyze websites, not only the client's website, but also the competitors' websites. So the task given to me by the Economic Social Research Council was to focus on strategy development. So the simple option was to do a situation analysis, macro review, micro review, internal review. I had a few other bits and pieces in there as well, because being a marketeer, it would be interesting to do the marketing communication element. And also this is the knowledge development, or the knowledge retrieval aspect, developing a chatbot for the various organizations. Let's look at some of the outputs of that. So the macro review. Now, What I've encouraged them to do, the clients and also my students, is that don't jump in big. So the pestle, number of elements to it. Don't try and say, right, ChatGPT, give me an overview of the pestle environment for my particular business. It's better to break it down into each element, and therefore you get a better output. Now, you could write a prompt, which would probably about 2 or 3 pages. That could do that, but I think at this stage, start small and build on it. So at the top, you can see the prompt that I've written. So we got the context. You are a marketing analyst doing a pestle review for a UK-based logistics company. Could you browse the internet and just focus on the potential legislative updates that could impact the industry? Please explain. So that's the context, and that's the objective. And then please explain the logic for your answer, and also include the references to support the findings. So that's quite important for me. So it backs up and counters any hallucination that might appeal. Finally, can you also provide me with potential strategies that I should exploit to do the various output? Now, we produced this, and I sat down with the company, and the company thought, actually, this is quite good. Some of the stuff they knew was there, and they knew about it, so that gave me some confidence in the output. And then they thought, oh, I didn't realize that was happening. I didn't realize that. So that was great, because actually, from a pestle point of view, a situation analysis point of view, it can give you things which you don't know is out there. Now, what you can't see here is the references that are included. So each one of these outputs had a little like quote mark at the top, and that would be the reference that would be used. I've since actually done some development, actually said, write it like the Vancouver style, so have a number 1 and then a reference at the end. I think that makes it a little bit easier, particularly if you're going to copy and paste the data outwards. So let's look at the impact on productivity, because remember, this is what I'm being paid to do the research on. At the top, you saw the traditional process, and speaking to the teams that are working with, this was like an average time to do the search of the information just for the legislation element. It would take about 3 hours, maybe about 240 minutes to do all of that. So most of them knew where the information had come from, because that's the business that they're in. So that was not really any time. 3 hours, and then about an hour to compile it into a report. Give the administrator the data, and they'll produce it in a nice report for you. Now, using generative AI, ChatGPT 4 took 1 minute 32 seconds. Now, that if you haven't got the training, it might take a little bit longer than that, but the example is clear. Run ChatGPT, 2 minutes 31 seconds, so total time 4 minutes and 1 second, compared to 240 minutes. So a 98% increase in productivity, and that's the sort of power that this can find. And this is why Goldman and Sachs are saying that all knowledge workers are at risk. Let's look at a micro review. So within the micro review, it comes a little bit more complex. You just cannot say to ChatGPT, haha, do this for me. You need to give it some context. So this is where the other platforms I have supported the output. So I created 4 columns here, the company in question, and the 3 competitors. And this is actually about 6 pages long on A4, but you're just seeing a page here. It's got lots of data about the particular website in question. And then I've only put 3 columns here, but you can actually, for the competitors, but you can make it as wide as possible. When I used to do this for real, I would have somewhere between 6 and 12 competitors that I would analyze by hand for my particular client. Now, because it's mainly text data, what I have found is that rather than using the standard CSV file or an Excel file, use the CSV UTF-8 format, because that's the more efficient process to get the output. And it can identify the gaps, your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities and threats from the various data out there. So that's one example. Another one I just want to share with you is the customer insight. So I've used Mentionalytics, which is this social listening tool, to identify what customers are saying about a particular topic. And what I've got, or what I ended up with, and this was just a week's worth of data, a data set with just over 630 words of information. So that's quite large. And this is where, when I was speaking to the company, they hadn't a clue what to do here. This is what I used to do as a consultant. This is where I used to make all my money, providing insights into clients on research around customer insights using social listening. So I shared with him the sort of process that I would take. So doing this by hand would take me somewhere between just under 3 hours to just over 6 hours, depending on the complexity of the task. So I had that data set and I threw it into the free version of ChatGPT and said, right, here's the prompt. Took me just under 5 minutes to write the prompt because I had to do a little bit of thinking around there. And then I sort of let it run. So first attempt, 6 minutes, 25, failed, couldn't do it. Regenerate again, another 6 minutes, just under 7 minutes, failed. Third attempt, 2 minutes, failed, and then fourth attempt, I said, no, this is no good. So the message here is actually, it's not the silver bullet. You do need to be able to do the basic principles of any machine learning process or statistics process. Remember, rubbish in, rubbish out. So you've got to clean the data. So after cleaning the data, I ended up with a different bug. But I could have maybe, and I haven't done this yet, I need to go back, I could have thought about pushing that through a vector database. That may have been a bit more efficient, and that may have given me a better output because the data sets are becoming much, much larger there. Oops, gone too far. So now, same sort of time between just under 3 hours and just over 6 hours. This time, I had to spend a bit more time cleaning the data, preparing the data and cleaning it. So there was a bit of time in there. However, the prompt still took the same amount of time, but this time it took between 1 and 3.5 minutes to get the output. And that was depending on what format I utilized. So PDF, CSV, Excel. PDF was the most efficient and it gave the best answer. What you'll find is that if you run the process again and again, it'll give you slightly different answers. And actually the PDF gave me the best answer here. So if you clean the data and you get it right, then you can have a 70 to 74% increase in productivity. And that's what that can do. Oops. So the key learning point there is you need to be able to understand the business processes associated with the task in question before you get the data and apply it to the generative AI platform in question. So another example, I talked very briefly about the chatbot. What we would do there, but the companies I was working with were focused more on the simpler tasks. But what I would plan to do is utilize their Outlook email marketing platform. And if they had something like a contact us or a specific question that customers will relate to us, I could download all that data. I would supplement that with the social listening element of the questions that are being asked to the company on the various social media platforms, and have a list of items that are frequently put together. And that can be created into a knowledge database that can be built or included within the website, so that you can have this chatbot to ask specific questions. Now, I don't know about you, some of the chatbots at the moment I've been on are absolute rubbish. I know one in particular. I know we're going live, but I'll say it anyway. NatWest, I was trying to ask them specific questions, and it just didn't understand what I was saying. And although there's machine learning in there, the context behind this generative AI wasn't embedded. So being able to come up with some great answers was not available. So that gives you an idea of the processes that I've identified. Now, I've done a lot more, and as I said, I'm just scratching the surface. So if you want to talk to me in a bit more detail about some of the others, then please get in touch. We're going to finish on some of these legal and ethical issues. So some of you may or may not be aware, but OpenAI and some of the other platforms are being sued by various bodies. So Getty Images is one of them that I mentioned, and a number of other authors. A number of authors are saying that their work has been stolen from their platform. So this causes a little bit of problem with you and I, or businesses more specifically, because do they want to be associated with these platforms that are going to be sued? You will notice, or you may have noticed, that all the big platforms are now saying that, don't worry, if you're sued, we will help protect you. That's quite bizarre, because can you imagine a small business based in Leeds trying to get in touch with OpenAI in San Francisco saying, I'm being sued by such and such, can you help me? They're just going to be inundated. So you have to take that with a pinch of salt, dare I say it, and make up your own mind. Now, when you look at the policies that are being pushed forward by government bodies, the US in particular, you can see that they are on the side of the big technology platforms, because they understand the importance of this, and they don't want to curtail what they're providing, because they know that this is going to be something big, not only from a commercial point of view, but for home security. So my personal feeling, right or wrong, is that they are pushing for this to move forward with. So you've got to bear in mind some of the issues that are associated with the various outputs here. Intellectual property and theft. Just also bear in mind, because I was working with a number of businesses, said, oh, great, I can create new logos or new images and what have you. When you create these items, you cannot copyright them, strictly speaking. Now, in the US, you can't copyright any AI material. In the UK, the law states that you can potentially do that, but you've got to be able to argue the case that it is not, or it's unique material, as it were. And there is this argument, actually, well, is it unique material if it's been learnt from what's on the website? And then you've also got this problem in the UK of, actually, who is the owner then of who gets that copyright? Is it you, or is it OpenAI or the LLM that you're providing? So these are aspects that you should be aware of. Now, if you're doing social media posts or answering questions about your customer database, frequently asked questions, then that shouldn't be a problem. But it's things like creating content or writing books or producing stuff which you are going to try and make money on, then you could have problems there going forward. You may remember Cambridge Analytica, and the report that the government did afterwards identified that actually our electoral system is broken. It'll never be fixed. I think it's going to be even worse now with artificial intelligence, because the sort of things that it can produce is mind-boggling. Just go onto YouTube and look up Donald Trump selling Kentucky Fried Chicken or fried chicken and orange juice. It looks like him. There are videos of David Attenborough doing some documentary or whatever, but it's not him. You can very easily replicate individuals to say things which they're not saying. So we as individuals in society need to be aware of this and understand that sometimes the information is not always what it seems. There is bias and discrimination, and this was particularly prevalent in the traditional AI systems. Now, Elon Musk has also just launched a LLM that utilizes Twitter data for its output. Can you imagine some of the biases and discriminative outputs that you could potentially get from that? that is something that you would need to consider. The privacy violations sort of link back to the intellectual property, accountability and responsibility. Now, if you're one of the things that I always advocate the businesses to do is to develop some form of policy within the organization that can be applied and is open and transparent. So you can say, right, we are doing this. These images are created from this. Everything is checked by a human in the end. And that's one of the key messages. Everything's checked by a human in the end. We're not making people redundant, but actually businesses will make people redundant, unfortunately. Security concerns, obviously that links back to the false information. But from a positive point of view, some of the elements that the generative AI can do can help identify some of the security issues accordingly. So that gives you a very brief overview of the project that I'm embarking on. Final thing, always be open and transparent, which is the sort of message I was alluded to in from the previous slide. And always have a human to check what's been delivered, because hallucinations could land you in a lot of hot water. So that's me done, my 45, well, actually 43.4 seconds, so not bad there, I think. If you need to get in touch, there's my contact details. Otherwise, any questions?
Thank you very much for that. It's very interesting. I just wondered what you would think of the role of causal inference, modern causal inference methods, the counterfactual and potential outcomes framework of causal inference methods. How do you think that would integrate with generative AI?
I didn't quite hear the question, sorry.
The causal inference methods?
Okay, yeah.
Because you mentioned like the input had what's the logic of?
Yeah.
Well, that can't be solved by ChatGPT because it's not got a causal element to it. And you also said what strategies to pursue. That's an intervention, so that needs causal understanding.
Yeah.
So I just wonder what you think the role of causal inference.
So so it's a good question, and I would suggest that the way you adopt this is very much like a brainstorming session. You use ChatGPT as your partner or your group of peers to bounce ideas off. It's not going to be the definitive, and you as an individual will have to make the final, or you as a team will have to make the final decision as to how you progress with that strategy. So examples here, it will talk about you need to actually put forward this, this, and this in terms of your strategy. What I've actually found was that I, as a, I feel like an ML data scientist, need to give it some guidance. So as the data set that we use there, I would have, and this is where the GPT's model will come in, some sort of ranking system to say, right, out of all of these are the high priority elements. So when you're looking at the gaps in a particular problem, then this comes first. So develop the strategy for that. If you let it just choose, it will choose whatever's top of the list, which might not be the right thing. So the business process aspect is key. You need to go in and actually give it some sort of guidance, particularly on the strategy side, what it should be doing, because otherwise it will either give you a generic strategy output or outputs which don't really reflect your requirements. But what me and my clients are doing, saying it's used very much as a soundboard or a development of ideas to go forward, and the individuals need to think about what they should do. As we move forward closer to general AI, then that could potentially be solved by that particular problem. But you need some sort of structure in to say, right, this is the ranking system, and build on that. And this is where it becomes a little bit more complex. So it's not a silver bullet. Does that sort of answer your question? Or yeah. Oh,
I've got a pragmatic and a speculative question, if that's okay. So the pragmatic question is around what are the risks to human skill set with using this kind of technology? And the speculative question is around, we know that AI poses a threat to human existence. So can you see how would that potentially play out?
so it's actually quite difficult to hear up here, I think.
Oh, sorry, is that not working? Maybe I'm holding it.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So my pragmatic question was around what are the risks to human skill sets by, excessive use of that technology? And the second question was kind of speculative around, we know AI poses a existential threat to humanity. Why is that?
Okay, so this is a debate that will take forever and ever to fill, and you'll be on one side or the other. And as an example, there are some of the founders and fathers of generative AI saying that it's not going to be a threat, but you've got the likes of Elon Musk saying that it is going to be a threat. He's got 11 kids at the moment because he thinks that we are at risk, and I need to build humanity to go forward, and he's trying to build spaceships to Mars. So you've got two real extremes. I think from a pragmatic point of view, I'm somewhere in the middle, and we're probably not going to get there. And hopefully, we can solve the problems. Now, what I recommend that you do, or anyone in here, is go to the BBC Sounds and review the Reith lectures. So last year there was the Reith lectures on AI, and they I can't remember his name now, but he did a presentation on 6 elements of AI, and he talked a lot about some of those things. And he talked about the countries involved trying to make sure that the technology doesn't compromise humanity. So it's really down to us, and we got to be able to, if we're getting closer to that, have a switch that we can turn off just in case that that thing does happen. So that was the first part. Now the second part is around I suppose was it us and the risks of redundancy? Was that the skills? So what I suggest is that rather than shy away from generative AI, just have a go and make sure you understand elements of it so that it doesn't become alien to you. You don't want to be that person who is in the room that doesn't know anything about the technology. And if you can position yourself as someone who is has a better understanding of it, then you have a better opportunity, in my opinion, of progressing forward in this very rapidly changing environment. I hope that answers your question. It was a bit of a difficult. Okay, speak loudly.
Next year in case where there was a composition get expired and then they produce their own part. So my question is, where does inspiration end in this context? AI inspiration end, and where does the training begin, and where is the ethical line?
So that's another really good question, and the sort of answer that I will give is that if you want a career that is going to be very lucrative and not at risk of generative AI, and that is go into the legal profession, focusing specifically on this topic. Now, I'm sorry to shy away, but I'm not a legal expert, and what you're going to find is that there's going to be two groups arguing exactly what you said there, and they will use things like fair use as a sort of a way of countering the argument. But it's I suppose the the authors, the musicians, they're the ones that are going to be or suffer the most. Now, we also have to bear in mind that up until just recently, we were all really happy to say, right, here's my data, so that my SEO, search engine optimization, can get me to position 1. So we were pushing it out to Google and whatever. And now we're saying, oh, no, I don't want that to happen. I'll take all that back. You can't do that now. We as individuals have given away our souls, as in our data, to the big companies, and it's going to be quite hard to bring that back. Now, there is a slight different context. If you look at the Hollywood strike that's taken place, that's sort of like on the other side, where they're not looking at data which has been absorbed from your various websites or books or whatever. They turn around to the actors and say, right, come in for one day, I'll pay you a day's worth of wages, but the image that I've captured for you, I will be able to use whenever I want, whatever. And that just cannot be allowed. And unfortunately, they've managed to come up with a solution to counter that. So it's a question which was going to be debated and argued in courts far beyond my pay scale. And I don't know what the output's going to be. You know, if we look at the amount of money that Google and Meta have paid out on other issues, these companies are just going to pay their way out of the problem and then start afresh. So like you, I think actually it's out there. So we've just got to live with it. But because I don't think any country is going to say, no, you can't use AI, because that's going to put whoever that country is belonging in at risk. You know, they're not going to be able to develop. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much for the engaging this. But get in touch if you do have anything.